Welcome. This is Dr. Helen Messier, Chief Medical Officer of Viome. This video explains the new results section of the app and some of the science behind what you'll be seeing. Let's get started. In results, you'll see your microbiome overview, your gut ecosystem, and your microbiome activity. Now, these are new names, but the underlying way we obtain your data and do the analysis has not changed. Let's go over each one. Your microbiome overview is a high-level summary of your gut microbial ecosystem. It takes into account the level of activity of microbes that are known to be beneficial and harmful. Remember that we need both types of bacteria working together to have a healthy, balanced microbiome. The good microbes will keep the potentially harmful ones in check, and the so-called harmful ones can provide the necessary stimulation to keep your immune system ready to react when needed and to stimulate your stem cells to regenerate your gut lining. You will also see whether you have a high or low range of beneficial microbial activity, an essential component of overall richness and diversity that we'll discuss a bit later. Your butyrate summary tells you the level of active bacteria you have that are capable of making butyrate. This is your butyrate production potential. We also look at the expression level of enzymes that are involved in butyrate production pathways, and this tells us how much butyrate your microbes are actually making. It's not unusual to see one of these high and the other low. For example, your microbiome could have high potential production but low actual production. This would mean that you have a lot of organisms that are capable of making butyrate, but they're not currently making it. On the other hand, you could have just a few organisms cranking out a high amount of butyrate. So why do we focus on butyrate? Because it's one of the most important things made by our microbes. Butyrate is a short-chain fatty acid made by some of our microbes from certain fibers in our diet, and it does a whole range of beneficial things for us, including feeding the cells lining our gut to keep it healthy. It plays a role in preventing cancer and leaky gut. It is an anti-inflammatory. It increases satiety, meaning it controls our appetite. It helps to balance our blood sugar, helps maintain an ideal weight, and even acts epigenetically to control our own human gene expression. As you scroll down, you can tap on your metabolic fitness and inflammatory activity scores. These scores are based on an integrative assessment of several functional categories. Each category consists of the activity level of many different microbes and the level of activity of specific pathways that are expressed by these microbes. So what exactly are pathways? Well, pathways are a series of biochemical events, functions, or processes that are performed by your microbes. In other words, they are a description of the biochemical steps that take place in order to carry out a specific function. For example, how a microbe uses glucose and converts it into energy, or ATP, is a pathway you might know of as the Krebs or TCA cycle. Viome looks at all the pathways that are being expressed by your microbes and scores them using proprietary, custom-generated pathway reconstructions. Extensive literature curation goes into the content of every pathway in order to deliver the most actionable pathway insights, to determine your scores, and to guide your recommendations. Let's look at your inflammatory activity, which at a high level assesses your microbiome's activities and functions related to inflammation. So what does this really mean? Well, as you know, inflammation is what your immune system uses to fight infection or heal damaged tissue. Now, since 70 to 80% of your immune system is found in the lining of your gut, there is a very close interaction between your microbiome and your immune system. There should be a balance between inflammatory and anti-inflammatory signals. Your microbes play an important part in training your immune system and maintaining this balance so that your immune system is ready to defend you when needed, but not so overstimulated that it gets out of hand and does not shut off. When your immune system is continuously activated, we call this chronic inflammation, and it's an underlying cause of almost all chronic diseases. Back to your inflammatory activity score. There is an enormous amount of analysis that goes into this score. First of all, it integrates several pro- and anti-inflammatory functional categories, each of them made up of the activity of a large number of microbes and pathways. For example, LPS, otherwise known as lipopolysaccharide, is made by certain bacteria, and it's extremely inflammatory. When your immune system sees LPS, it will go on a rampage. The level of expression of the microbial genes that are part of the LPS production pathways are analyzed and used as just one of the components. This component is part of the pro-inflammatory category. To understand this even further, there are multiple pathways that result in LPS production and even more than one type of LPS. We also take into account the activity of microbes that are known to be inflammatory and put them into tiers based on how inflammatory they're capable of being. For example, an organism like Campylobacter hominis is a Tier 1 organism, since if it's present, it has the potential to cause a lot of inflammation, whereas an organism like Desulfovibrio desulfuricans is a Tier 2 organism, and if present, would contribute slightly less to your overall inflammatory activity score. The same is also done with anti-inflammatory microbes and pathways. These are all then given a weighting and taken integratively to determine your overall score. You want to aim for a lower inflammatory activity score. Now, the same type of analysis using the activity levels of both microbes and pathways that contribute to metabolic issues like weight gain and insulin resistance, or protect you from weight gain and insulin resistance, are used to determine your metabolic fitness score. For example, primary and secondary bile acid production pathways are just some of the pathways that are analyzed to determine your metabolic fitness score. We also take into account the activity of microbes such as Akkermansia muciniphila or Lactobacillus plantarum, which are two of the 3,746 strains of microbes we look at that are known to be associated with good overall metabolic health. On the other hand, this is balanced by organisms such as Bolophila wadsworthia or Blaudia obium that are two of the 4,852 possible strains we look at that are known to be associated with decreased metabolic health. The graph in red, purple, and green should help you visualize how your microbiome is doing. In this case, you want to aim for a higher score. Let's move on to your gut ecosystem. This section consists of newly designed visualizations for microbial richness, microbial diversity, and gut lining shedding insights. Your microbial richness is the total number of active strains of bacteria in your sample, while your microbial diversity is the overall activity level of each of those strains. These two measurements are very important in assessing the overall health or balance of your microbiome and how likely it is to be able to help you adapt to a different environment. Think of your microbiome as a rainforest. When a rainforest is healthier and more robust, the more biodiversity it has. In a rainforest, there are many different plants and trees that form a complex ecosystem. When a new weed is introduced, it will not take over because there are so many other plants keeping everything in balance. On the other hand, a cornfield has very low biodiversity, and it's quite possible that if a certain weed is introduced, it can take over the whole field. Biodiversity creates resilience. It is the same with the microbiome. The richer and more diverse it is, the healthier and more robust it will be, and the healthier and more resilient you tend to be. Your gut lining shedding is a measurement of the amount of cells that are being shed from the lining of your gut. They reflect the overall cell turnover of this tissue. An optimal amount of cell turnover is important for keeping your gut lining intact. Think of the lining of your gut as a fence between your microbes and your immune system. As you know, good fences make good neighbors. If the fence is intact, everyone gets along. But if the fence is broken down or has loose boards, then the neighbor's pets or kids can get through and cause problems and animosity. So maintaining a healthy gut barrier is critical for maintaining a healthy balance between your microbiome and your immune system. If there is a breakdown of the gut lining, it can lead to microbial components such as LPS getting across and then overstimulating your immune system, ultimately leading to inflammation. The gut lining is one of the tissues in the body that is supposed to have a very fast cell turnover to regenerate itself and withstand the continual wear and tear that it experiences. So you want to aim for the middle of the road. Too much cell shedding is indicative of inflammation. But on the other hand, not enough cell shedding means that the lining might not be turning over and renewing itself the way that it should. Now it's time to meet your microbes. In this activity summary, you'll see the number of active strains of all microbes that you have in your microbiome and can compare this to others. The graph represents the number of active strains that are seen in all other Viome users, and the line shows where your microbiome falls. So in this example, if you're in the 67th percentile, it means that you have more active organisms than 67% of other users, which is a good thing. If you're in the 50th percentile, it means that 50% of users have more and 50% of users have less active organisms than you do. Remember that more active microbes creates a richer microbiome. Also listed on this page are your top 5 beneficial microbes. These are the good microbes that have the highest level of activity out of all the microbes in your gut. You can think of them as the bacteria that are working the hardest for you and performing many beneficial functions. Let's move on to comparing your microbes. You can compare them with yourself, as in this first page. This lists all of the microbes that are active in your gut in alphabetical order. You can see if each one is highly active, the hard workers, moderately active, or has low activity, the lazier ones. You will also notice that there are no numbers associated with each microbe. This is because the microbiome is a complex ecosystem, and there is not a one-to-one relationship between the presence of a particular strain and any health insights, scores, or recommendations. We take the level of activity of all of the organisms into account, and more importantly, the level of activity of the pathways when determining your scores and recommendations. A fun feature is the ability to compare the activity of each of your microbes to other groups of Viome users. For example, you can compare your microbes to those of males, females, vegetarians, omnivores, and different age groups, so you can see how you measure up. You need to also remember that we all have unique microbiomes. So even though 2 microbiomes are very different from each other in terms of composition and microbial activity, they can still both be healthy. Focus on your other insights and scores to determine how well your microbiome is doing overall. By doing this comparison, you can have fun exploring your active microbes. The other thing to note when you meet your microbes is that you will see each microbe at its most accurate taxonomic level possible. When the strain of an organism can be identified, it will be shown at that very precise level, and not at the less precise species or genus levels of the same organism. But sometimes a microbe is seen that does not have a strain designation yet, and so we will show it at the level that science is currently capable of identifying. You will also see that each microbe is labeled as a bacteria, archaea, virus, or eukaryote. Some of the microbes are also labeled as a probiotic organism. In this case, we're defining probiotic microbes as something that you would find in commercially available probiotic supplements. Now, in many cases, companies don't list the bacteria in their products at a strain level, but only at a species level. So we've labeled all the strains of a particular probiotic species with a P, even though that may not be the actual strain in a specific product. 2 more points. We've pulled in keywords and have added explanations for them for your reference. And most importantly, don't forget to check out your recommendations. These have been customized for you to address all of your results. Thanks for joining me on this walkthrough. Have fun exploring your microbiome.